Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Making Multifamily Money podcast. So I'm really excited that I was able to connect with Cam Burke. Actually stumbled across his channel from the YouTube algorithm and just loved his content. It's very raw. It's very authentic. And what I really like about Cam is he basically scaled to 50 units of real estate at 24 years old without any partners. So to me, I just found that really impressive. And he just is very raw and authentic how he delivers his content, and it's super educational. So you know that he definitely knows his stuff. So welcome Cam to the channel.
Thank you, Steven. I appreciate you, brother. And I'm sorry we had this plan last week and I blew straight through it. But that's just me being upfront. I'm glad that you followed up. I felt bad when you reached out. I'm like, oh goodness, I hope Steven still wants to record this because I was excited. I checked out some of your content when you reached out and I like your authenticity as well. I don't exactly connect with everyone, and so I'm excited to do this.
Yeah, glad to make this happen. So like what really intrigued me about your story is obviously invest in Oklahoma City as well. For those who follow my channel, I own a 26 unit in Oklahoma City, Bethany specifically, and then a 20 unit in Enid, Oklahoma, which is a little bit more of a secondary market. But what I was really curious about was your real estate journey. I mean, obviously, you're pretty young, I would say, and to own that much real estate is very impressive because most people are like, "Wow, Stephen, you're 35 and you own a lot of real estate." But then I always get humbled. so, so Cam, I'm curious to hear about your story from your first store and how you scaled over time to your current portfolio.
Uh, Let me try and run through this story so it makes sense for everyone, and I'll just sum it up a little bit. But, I grew up in a little submarket outside of Oklahoma City, eastern Oklahoma City, in Choctaw, Oklahoma. And so lived with my mom from about 14 onward. Long story short, she went to prison when I was 17, and she's a single mom, lived with her. And I pretty much ended up staying in that house that she was renting from my grandma for about 8 months before my grandma found out. She moved back in. I was with my wife at the time. We've been together for, dude, I don't even know, going on probably 7, 8 years. I should know this, but we've been together for a while since high school. The relationship between my grandma and myself, it just wasn't exactly working out. So one day my wife's like, "Hey, you're coming home with me." She wasn't even asking. She's like, "You're coming home with me." So went home with her, ended up living with her and my in-laws now from like 17 to 19. And so I like to highlight that because I don't want it to seem like I came from nothing. You know what I mean? I definitely was given a leg up there with being able to live with them, and it was a huge blessing for sure. And so, when I moved in with them, I didn't want to rely on them per se. They definitely helped me out a lot. But I had a little Mercedes worth like $4,500. It's an old mid 2000s model that my mom had bought me before she went to prison. Me and Brooke, would be his what I call her, me and my wife, we were pretty much in all the same classes. We enrolled in the same classes. So I was like, I'm gonna sell this thing. So I sold it and then ended up snowballing and we started to buy and sell used vehicles from the insurance auction. And so I took that cash, went and bought a vehicle. I don't remember what I bought for it, maybe a GMC, and I sold that. And then I just slowly would buy one, sell one, buy one, sell one. I didn't make a ton of money doing it, but I did that in high school, and then also me and a buddy would drive down to Garland, Texas. They have this website liquidation.com, and so we'd found that you could buy nice stainless steel refrigerators for like 300-400 bucks a piece. They didn't always work, but what we found is if we bought 7 to 10, we'd have a couple that we had to trash out, but the rest would we just need to clean up and they'd work. And so we were flipping those for, buying them for three, selling them for 650, 700 a piece. And so that wasn't easy work, but we'd drive down there. It was fun, and clean them up, bring them back, clean them up. Thankfully, Bert, my father-in-law, would let us use the shop. And so we clean them up and then go and sell them. And so I don't know, in high school, I was just trying to do whatever I could. Bought and sold used refrigerators and then bought and sold tires. I bought and sold pretty much anything that I could off like marketplace and whatnot to make some money. And that was like my first look at wheeling and dealing, which I just love. Like I enjoy doing that. And so long story short, I tried the drop shipping thing in high school. That didn't work out. And then the senior year came around. I'm like, well, crap, I don't I don't I don't want to go to college. I was already enrolled in current classes, so I had like 18 credit hours or something. But I knew I didn't want to work for anybody because I just had I definitely had some issues growing up, authority issues. My mom went to prison, and I knew that I definitely didn't want to work for anybody. And so real estate was just kind of like a stepping stone. Long story short, ended up jumping into real estate, and from there, it was 8 months of not selling anything. It took me 8 months to sell my first property, and that's where, like, for me, without living with my in-laws, it would have been really rough 8 months. And so that was nice. And I also had probably $10,000 to $12,000 saved up from flipping vehicles and cars and refrigerators from high school. So I had a little bit of money when I graduated to help float us. But yeah, we were able to live with them. Sold that first property and then realized pretty quickly like I need to figure something out. Because up until this point, I hadn't exactly struggled to make money, so it was just me being naive, but I got into real estate thinking, okay, as soon as I get my license, we're gonna start slinging deals. And it definitely didn't work like that. I didn't have the business mindset. I didn't quite understand how to get leads. And when I got in, I had this like I definitely had a what do they call it? The where I felt like people didn't want to work with me because I'd never bought and sold a house. So it's really hard to go and try and help somebody buy and sell a house as a realtor whenever you've never bought and sold one yourself. So I definitely didn't feel like I was in the right place. So it took a long time for me to like get over that mindset of like, okay, I can help people go and buy and sell houses. And I really didn't build all of my confidence up until I started buying and selling my own houses. Because I'm a young guy, and when I'm shaved up, I look like I'm 15. And so I didn't have I didn't have the facial hair back then, and so that was pretty difficult in the beginning, to buy and sell real estate. And so mainly that just boiled down to me not believing that I could help people, even though I could. Long story short, joined the Levinson team, sold a few deals there, and then I stumbled upon creative financing. It's crazy. One of the meetings that we're sitting in a meeting, somebody brings up how they had just done a deal with a lease purchase company here in Oklahoma City, and something just sparked in my head because I'd always done these, Facebook ads and marketplace listings, and so something sparked in my head. I'm like, I need to reach out to them. So I reached out to the owners of this creative financing company and made a relationship with them. They kind of explained how they work. They're like, hey, we're 7% down. We work with people with challenge credit, challenge work history, people who can't qualify for traditional financing but still have the means to purchase. And so I started taking listings and then marketing them with our lease purchase options, and I turned around overnight. Well, I went from no sales. I think this was April or January through April of 2022. I sold 0 houses. And then from April till the end of the year, I sold 9 million, which was pretty good for me that year. And then the next year to 2023, I sold 12 to 14 million. I can't exactly remember. I was still solo agent. We went solo at that time, me and my wife. She was still licensed. Um, she's not licensed anymore. It wasn't for her. But yeah, I sold 12 to 14 million, and then we just kind of took off. I tried to build a team, didn't quite work because I once again didn't have the leadership skills. And so I built up this team like 6 agents, and then I had to trash. I say trash it. It wasn't trashing anybody, but it wasn't on them. I just couldn't make the team work because I didn't have the leadership skills to truly teach them, and I didn't have the systems in place either. So that completely failed, and I went back to just selling real estate solo until end of end of 2023 is when I had Kingston join my team, and I'd already had Kami, who was my assistant at that time, and we've scaled up, and now we have 8 agents. We did 30 million in sales last year. We're on track to do over 200 transactions this year. We'll probably do 35, 40 million this year. So through all of that, the reason why I've been able to buy so much real estate is I kicked off a lot of cash through selling real estate, and so I've just taken that cash and I've reinvested it. I bought my first duplex middle of 2022, and I bought that for 52,000 out in Shawnee, Oklahoma. It's kind of kind of rougher area for sure. Everybody was scared to go out to Shawnee. And for me, I looked at that market and I said, okay, let's just look at Shawnee and what it has to offer. So I know that Shawnee has a Lowe's, Shawnee has a tropical smoothie, Shawnee has dealerships, they have a mall. It's its own little submarket. I looked at the population growth. I saw that the population has been right around 30,000 inside Shawnee for the last decade. It's not gone up, it's not gone down. It's gone up just a little bit, but it's pretty much remained stable. It's an old town, has a lot of industry, a lot of blue collar work. And what I really like about the Shawnee market is all of the little rural submarkets. So Seminole, Chandler, Wellston, Meeker, all of those feed into Shawnee for work. And a lot of people that work in those little submarkets, those people live inside of Shawnee. And so for me, as everybody was worried about investing out there, I was like, you know what? If Lowe's, which is a multi-billion dollar company, and if Tropical Smoothie and Qdoba and all of these other large chains, they see something in Shawnee, they probably have done the market research. And Shawnee's probably not going anywhere. The infrastructure is not going anywhere. They see that there's an industry out there, and they definitely are smarter than me. And they have people that are smarter than me. So I thought that duplex did really well with it. 52,000, put 20 in rehab, rented for 1450, whatever that came out to each side, like 750 a side or somewhere in there, 700 a side. And so that was a really good deal. And then I just slowly scaled up from there. And I was buying these assets and getting like a 2% rule on these little houses out there. They do come with their downside. I've definitely had my headache out in Shawnee just because you get it different. You just have kind of a low income tenant, and that comes with its own challenges for sure. And so I have diversified. I kind of built my wealth out there, was able to build a lot of equity and cash flow, and then I started coming closer to the city and competing with the guys in the city from there, and I've slowly scaled up. So I can squirrel and I can talk for a long time, Stephen. So feel free to interrupt me, but I am a little all over the place, which you probably see from my YouTube videos.
No, thanks for that context because I think similar to me, like I basically had the privilege as well of being able to live at home, but mine
Nice.
mine was a lot longer because like I came out of pharmacy school as a pharmacist with like 250K student debt. So
Oh, yeah.
just yeah, crazy. But just being able to like stay at home is like the greatest way to build your financial foundation because your biggest expense, especially starting off, is always your housing. The fact that you're able to, be able to live at home and then be able to be humble and save up $10,000 to $12,000. Like even nowadays, like people who are older than us don't even have $10,000 to $12,000.
Mhm.
I'm sure you experience it with your tenants, right? Like there's
For
tenants that are
sure.
older and they lose their job or one bad situation happens. Now their rent is late or non-existent. So what you did really smart as well was you basically built up a big active income,
Hmm.
which is your real estate business. And it took you time to get there, but I would say you scaled pretty fast, in my opinion. It might have been a good time, like in,
Yeah,
that
for
window.
sure.
But like you said, you had to overcome, you're young, you had no experience at the time. And even me, I'm skeptical of real estate agents because a lot of the real estate agents here in California, they rent themselves. So I'm just like, well, like if you say real estate's the best investment, how come you don't own any yourself? Like I tend to follow what people do, not what they say.
Exactly.
And I'm sure you're the same way. And then, but it was smart that you learned your market by selling real estate, and then eventually you're like, I have to take down these units myself
Hmm.
because that's how you build true wealth long term, and that's how you escape from your job, right? Whether that's you're a pharmacist, whether you're a realtor, it becomes kind of optional. I guess for me, like the question I have is like, what that path from like the first home to like current state, like how long did that take, and like what was kind of your trajectory to get there?
Good question, brother. Cool. The first home that my wife and I bought before the duplex was actually in Choctaw. And, at that time, I was like, I'm going to house hack. We're going to buy a duplex. We're going to live in it. And Shawnee was too far out. I hadn't found that duplex yet. But one day I get brought this off-market deal, 82,000, little two-bed, one bath in Choctaw. At this point, this was right going into 2023. So I'd sold the 9 million. We had spent absolutely no money. So, I'm kicking off $5,000, $7,000, maybe $10,000. I think I had like a $15,000 a month. Um, Nothing changes, about our life. And so we had uh, we had been kicking off a decent amount of cash. We're going into 2023, and I get brought this off market deal, 82,000. Well, this time I don't have the tax returns to be able to buy, but I have the means to buy. And so I approached my lease purchase company, once again, creative financing, and they said, yeah, bring 7% down, we'll finance this for you. And so I brought 7% down to 82, and they financed it. And then we remodeled the house out of pocket, spent about 20 grand on that appraised for 150, 151, I think is what it appraised for. So good amount of equity in the deal. But, at the time, I had a lot of people that were saying, don't, you shouldn't go buy. You shouldn't go buy. It's buying is, it's so much headache. You're not ready for that. Dealing with contractors, you're too busy to manage contractors. But I had just a couple people in my life that were like, go do it, dude, because your first deal doesn't have to be a screamer of a deal. It doesn't have to be perfect. But what it is going to do is it's going to give you the confidence to go do other deals. My brother was one of them, and then somebody else that I knew from the team was the other. And so, I was like, let's do it. Scared the shit out of me. I will say that for sure. At this time I'm 19. Once again, my mom's gone to prison. I grew up in a mobile home before that, and so I didn't quite have like a backdrop. Of course, B and her parents, like they're super supportive, but it's not like I've got my parents that I'm gonna go back to, if something goes wrong, and so well, definitely was not going to go and ask B's parents for help. They'd already helped me enough. And so, anyways, we bought it and we remodeled it, and me and B moved in there, and we're paying maybe $1,000 a month on this little house. It's not much at all. And so, of course, real estate keeps getting better. So 14 million, and so I think we made like 200 grand the next year. And once again, we're still $1,000 a month. I'm still driving a little Volkswagen Jetta. And in my opinion, I'm like, this is cool. You know what I mean? Like we're kicking off a ton of cash. And for me, I've always enjoyed taking vacations, and so that's where we spent our money that year. But other than that, we were saving up. I think we'd probably gone, and I can't remember exactly, but by the time we moved in, remodeled the house, probably down in like the 50, 60K range in the bank, and then just slowly built up that next year. I think we built up to around 100 grand in the bank. Then we bought the duplex. And so I will say one of the reasons why I think I've been able to buy so much real estate quickly is I don't BRRRR anything. I've got cash in every single deal that I've ever bought. But it's because A, we kicked off a lot of cash, and then B, we practice delayed gratification. So, a lot of people when they're making 200 grand a year, they think that they deserve something new, and maybe they do. Everyone's got different goals, so I don't want people to think that that's wrong. But if you're wanting to grow a portfolio, I would try to practice delayed gratification. And so that's what we did. Is it's like we're just going to reinvest everything. And at this point, I'm so hooked on buying real estate. Like that's my dopamine hit. A lot of people get hooked on buying like a new house or like new cars, but I'm like, I want it every time I add a door or I buy a deal, like it's a big dopamine hit for me. And so I'm thankful I got lucky that that is just what I enjoy doing. Like I've never once really worried about what other people think of me, and funny enough, we lived in that house up until end of last year. This time last year is when we moved out, and we made, a little over $500,000 last year. And so to live in an $80,000 house and be making that amount of cash, kicking off 30, 40K a month in cash flow, for me, I thought it was a little bit of flex. I'm like, I don't care what people think of us because I know what we've got in our bank account. So, anyways, just practicing the delayed gratification and not really spending money on anything outside of buying assets really gave us a leg up. And so I think once you have a little bit of cash on hand, it gives you the confidence to just go and do deals. It's like even today, my CPA says I keep a little too much cash on hand, which, you know, probably doesn't make the most sense on paper. I could go buy more deals and it would make more sense on paper, but I sleep really good at night. I do stress sometimes, but I don't stress often. And I know even if I buy a horrible deal, I bring 50 grand to the table and life goes on. Like it's not going to break me, and so that's what gives me confidence to just go and buy and continue to buy. But also through selling real estate, me and my team, we've sold 85 million in real estate. I know what buyers are looking for. I've kind of niched down and I'm confident when I buy a deal. I'm like, I know I can sell this, and so that's given me kind of a unique selling proposition that maybe a lot of people don't have when they're buying flips. Like I know if I'm buying something over 200,000 in the Oklahoma City metro and it doesn't have a garage, that's going to be a pretty tough sale. Or if the master's on the second floor, that's going to be a tough sale as well, And I also know, subway tiles played out right now. The grays are played out. And so I see a lot of that stuff as it's happening with buyers because we work with a lot of buyers. So, anyways, hopefully that answers your question, Stephen. Delayed gratification, having a lot of cash, and just continuing to buy assets, And so I will say I've got the leg up where I just have been able to kick off a lot of active income that maybe a lot of people don't have, but you could still do the same thing in BRRR. I just personally didn't want to get too excited and buy too many deals at once and go underwater, because I don't I don't really have a backup plan. And so I watched some guys that were younger go and scale up to 70 units in one year and then go back down to zero. There's a guy here locally that did that, and I watched him do that, and I was like, I definitely don't want to do that, And so that's why I've been cautious and just kept a lot of cash on hand.
Yeah, no, I love that story because basically you master delayed gratification, and the longer you can extend delayed gratification, the more wealth you can build. That's basically how I got started my first 10 years out as a
Nice.
pharmacist. Basically, when I graduated, obviously you have 250K student debt. I just lived like a poor college student still because, I was 23 at the
Yeah.
time. The longer you can do that, like you get the hack you mentioned was a used paid off car, right? That's like the greatest
Mhm.
hack you could ever have because it's very tempted after you graduate pharmacy school to go buy like a new BMW, a new Audi, or like a Tesla now, right? And then also like lifestyle inflation. Like obviously, I was just living
Mhm.
at home in my childhood home when I was making like good money as a pharmacist, and I was a director at one point, and then living in my mom's like house, right?
Wow. That's
And
awesome.
you would not expect it, right? And it's kind of weird. Like it was kind of a flex to be like, oh, like how little can I spend?
Hmm.
But one thing I want to make clear is that even though I didn't spend much, I was very intentional on how I spent. So for me, and it sounds like you, I didn't really care about clothes. I didn't really care about like the nicest things. I would buy on sale, buy on clearance, right? Easy now with online shopping, Amazon. And on top of that, I basically just prioritize all my money on travel, just like you, right? Very,
Nice. Yeah.
very
Exactly.
millennial Gen Z, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Is optimizing on travel. And if you credit card hack, right, whether Chase Reserve, Chase Preferred, whatever, Capital Venture, like you can actually get your flight covered if you go somewhere like international. And, hotel wise, we didn't need to be in a 4-star, 5-star hotel. We just needed to be in a hotel that was in a great location because we would always be out and about. So I think it's just being very intentional with how you spend, which is what it seems like you mastered, Cameron. And also like not caring what other people think. So it's impressive that you learned that at such a young age. It took me to like my 30s
Mhm.
to realize that. And, for me, I didn't have people supporting me with real estate either. Like people actually told me, Steven, why are you buying in 2017? It's going to crash. Don't do it. Right. But as you
Wow.
kind of mentioned in your story, I kind of just took the leap of faith, right? I just said, okay, worst case, I'm going to buy this house. I did wipe out my savings because I had to put $8,000 down just for a 10% down
Yeah.
payment on an 800K house. And I would live with the master. So this is house hacking. And I would rent out the 3 other bedrooms for $1,000 each, which would cover the mortgage. And
Nice.
I just said, worst case, kind of related to you, like you're scrappy as well. Like if I lost my job, I knew I could find another job in maybe a month or two. And if that was the case, I could literally just live in the living room. It was a huge living room, give a wall partition and then
Yeah.
rent out my master bedroom for like $1,500, and those 4 tenants would cover the house itself. And I would live for free in this like little living room, right? Once again, college mentality. I
That's
didn't mind,
awesome.
you know, slapping up an air mattress and doing that because you have to do what you need to do to survive. And that
Hmm.
was my worst case scenario. So I just said, am I okay with that worst case scenario? The answer is yes. So I said, okay, I can take this risk. Right. And then I was also fortunate that like if I knew push came to shove, like my parents are self-sufficient, fortunately, but they could help me like for a month or
Yeah.
two if needed. Right. Like I said, not many people have that privilege or luxury, but I knew I did. So, and also I thought too, like if I bought this deal and I went bankrupt, like, okay, I would file for bankruptcy. My student debt will still be there. I can still become a pharmacist. I would lose my house. My credit score would be wiped.
Hmm.
But I'm just back at zero where I started, like, 2, 3 years ago. So for
Exactly.
me, it didn't like seem that scary. And kind of like with you took a leap of faith. You bought your first property, but it seems like you could have put much larger of a down payment than 7% if you wanted to.
Hmm.
And I mean, $50,000 home, it's pretty inexpensive, right? Like $1,000 a month.
Exactly.
Like for context, that's just HOAs in some places in California.
Yeah, I know. That's crazy to think about.
Yeah, especially in the coastal areas, like HOA is $1,000 a month. Like my HOA is $600. So
Yeah.
you're in a cash flow market. So and
Hmm.
another thing which I kind of want to dive into next is like it's interesting how you basically bought value add real estate. You put in the renovation. I'm assuming did you bake that in the loan or did you just self fund the renovations?
I self-funded the renovation.
So you self funded the renovations, and then obviously you increased the value of the asset,
Hmm.
but you didn't do a cash out refinance. You didn't leverage further. So that's actually really smart because that's how you cash flow better, and that's how you build a strong foundation because you could have leveraged to the hill, pulled out all your money, probably your down payment, your renovation costs, plus coding costs, and then go use that same money to go buy more real estate. But as you mentioned, people scaled fast and then they built a house of cards and it got blown over. And I experienced that at one point when I had 90 units at one point, but I had a mobile home park in Alabama
Hmm.
that was cash flow negative 10K. And I was just like, wait, unit count
Per
wise,
month.
yeah, yeah, per month.
Golly.
Yeah, because I was like, fixing it up and bad
Yeah.
property management, bad tenants, the
Yeah.
whole shebang. And I hit my goal of like close to 100 units, but I was like, wait, this is like terrible. Like I'm losing money every month.
Hmm.
Decided to sell that mobile home park for $100,000 loss, which is what I anticipate. When I bought the deal, I said my worst case I'll lose 200K. I lost 100.
Yeah.
My upside was from a million to probably like 5, 6 million if this deal went well.
Hmm.
So
Wow.
I was basically willing to take the shot, right? Like
The risk
upside,
reward was there. Yeah.
yeah,
That's
it
how I
was
weigh a lot of
upside
stuff too.
4 million. Worst case was 200K loss. I ended up losing 100. But yeah, let's kind of dive into that, like laying that foundation. So, I would have been tempted to BRRR, especially interest
Hmm.
rates if they were lower. What kind of held you back from like, I guess, burning the property? And what's kind of like your debt to equity position right now in terms of your real estate?
Yeah. So I was, I like I said, I grew up kind of boom and bust. Like my dad, I grew up with them until I was like 14. Lived in a single wide trailer, not very wealthy at all. He laid tile. He's doing very well now, but at the time he was laying tile and it was single income. Um, when I moved in with my mom, hopefully I can say, can I say drugs on here, Steven?
Yeah, yeah, fully
Okay.
transparent.
Yeah, okay. She bought and sold marijuana, and this is when it was not legal in Oklahoma. And so, yeah, to be totally transparent, I moved drugs with her when I was 15. We'd go up to Oregon, we'd go to Chicago, we'd mule 30, 40, 50 pounds back at a time. Obviously, I didn't quite know better. She's my mom, I was trying to help her out. It looked good to have a kid in the car if anything happened. She got pulled over. But yeah, I mean, it's fast money, you know what I mean? So she's making money. One month she'd have money, next month she wouldn't. Then we'd go do another haul, and then she wouldn't have money. And then then she'd just leave for a couple weeks. I'd maybe be at home for that haul. And so I grew up with just a weird mindset on money. And then she went to prison and she had nothing, and then I had nothing. And so anyways, it was fast money all through it. And for me, I was like, I did not want to do that. I didn't want to, I'd never been taught money skills. Nobody taught me money skills. Moved out with my dad when I was 14. At that time, he didn't have any money, or 13, somewhere in there, and obviously wasn't quite I didn't understand how money works. And then I'd moved in with my mom, which she had a um, very poor mindset on money, and just like Amazon packages, just fast money, buy a bunch of shit. So uh, I kind of had to build that from nothing on how money works and what my viewpoint on money is. And so my whole thing was I'm gonna hoard this cash so that doesn't happen to me. Yeah, I was not a BRRRR guy because I'd watched these other guys go down in our market and I didn't want to. And so I think that I was probably a little too conservative for a long time. I've now opened up and I realized my skill sets and what I can do, but I will say I still keep 250 liquid roughly, and that's not even, I mean, that's just in my bank, and so I keep a lot liquid, probably more than needed. And I will say when I get down to that like 200 mark, I start to stress out big time. It stresses me out. I'm like, I feel broke, which I know that sounds silly to say, but that's like my threshold. If I dip under 200 grand, I'm probably stressing quite a bit. And I have not in a while, thankfully, not since last year, but that's kind of my threshold that keeps me safe in my mind, I guess, And so I wouldn't say that I have too much of a rhyme or reason other than I just grew up with a poor mindset. And for me, I like having the leverage, and I think that leverage and the cash makes me an unmotivated buyer and an unmotivated seller. I don't need to I don't need to buy a deal and I don't need to sell a deal. And so in doing so, that gives me leverage to negotiate because I'm not going to be as emotional as the next guy. I still do get emotional. I still get deals. I'm like, you know what? Screw it. Let's offload this. Let's take a little hit, not like a loss, but let's make 5K less just to move it, But for the most part, I'm not super motivated. I don't have to go and buy a deal. I don't have to go and sell a deal, and I think that that allows me to scale and go do deals. So, anyways, to the bird question though, Stephen, um, I was kicking off decent amount of cash flow. My thing was I just wanted a good loan to value. I wanted 60% loan to value across my portfolio. And because if my thought always was, at this point, I had realized I was really trying to study economics. I didn't go to college, I did just a little bit of credit hours, but I was trying to study economics and understand, okay, how can I prevent myself if we go back into a recession like 2008? What can I do to hedge against that? Because nobody really knew what the market was doing, but I started to feel the signs when I was selling real estate back in even 2021 and quarter one of 2022. I had written $15 million in offers Q1 of 2022, and I got 3 million under contract. And in Oklahoma City, like that's a lot of competition. And I realized, watching videos and just learning, I'm like, these rates need to go up. They've been down for too long. Why are we holding these rates as low as we are? With all the money we printed, we saw a huge amount of inflation. And so for me, I'm like, I don't see a great outlook on the next couple of years. So how can I hedge against that? And then sure enough, all these guys that were burring, that were counting, they were going hard money, and then they were burring into, DSCR, long-term financing, they underwrote at 4 or 5% interest rates when they pulled out their perm financing, and then rates were 7 or 8 because they ripped the band-aid off and increased. And I had guys out here in that were investing from California calling me, and they were down bad emotionally from the deal flow. They had bought way too many deals way too quickly. There was no way out. I mean, these guys were getting sold deals when before, like the the price they purchased the deal at was the price I would have ran the ARV at, and it still needed 50K in work. I'm like, dude, you got taken. Like, this is a bad deal. There's nothing we can really do here other than you take a loss. So I kind of watched that unfold, and I was thinking, just because a property appraises for 200,000 does not mean I can sell that for 200,000. And so I was watching that with my properties as I was getting these after ARV appraisals. I'm like, this appraised for 130. I can't sell this for 130 right now, not in these conditions, And so if I go cash out 80%, 85%, I'm going to be in trouble, And so I've watched that unfold with a lot of investors out here. The other thing with the BRRR that I don't think, Bigger Pockets and a lot of these places or channels talk about is like most of a lot of the people that I see burring are putting lipstick on a pig. They've got wooden windows. They're not updating those. They've got an HVAC that's 25 years old. It's an R22 unit. The roof is 10 years old. And so what happens is they go put lipstick on this thing. The tenant turns out in a year and a half. It needs new cosmetics because they, didn't do the paint correctly. They didn't put primer. They used cheap laminate floors, and now the windows are in worse condition. The roof's in worse condition. Well, they cashed out 100,000. The properties I would only pay 100 grand for it. You know what I mean? And so there is I feel like a good way to burr if you do things above board and you do them correctly. And I think there's a other way to burr, which is what I see a lot, which is just putting lipstick on a pig, and then a year and a half later, they're stuck with this asset. Yeah, they may not have any money in the deal, but now it needs 5K and they're not going to get bank money. And so what do? You sell for a loss, or do you go fund it out of pocket? And so I don't know. I just watched a lot of this unfold, but for me, I've changed my mindset. I will pull out cash. And now that I've built my portfolio, I'm good to pull out cash. I'm 65% loan to value across my portfolio. You were asking that, Stephen. So, I've got, I do have a partner on some properties. We started buying some commercial and 2023. So I've got about 50 units that I own free and clear. That's a salon that I own, some vacant property that I own, and then the rest is single family and small multifamily. And then I'm 50-50 with a partner. We started buying some commercial together. We bought 12,000 square feet of flex space. Then we bought an 8-unit apartment complex, and then we bought 4 units trip center this year as well. And so that I own 50-50. But um, anyways, back to the stuff that I own free and clear. It's a little under 6 million in real estate that I own, not free and clear, but that I own under, just with me and my wife. I will, I do plan to cash that out. But when I look at what most people are perming out, which is DSCR for the most part on single family, you go talk to these DSCR guys and they're like, yeah, it's a 3-year prepayment, or it's a 5-year prepayment. I'm like, well, dude, we're like probably right getting into rates coming down over the next year or two, unless nobody knows for sure, but unless something drastic happens, it looks like rates are going to start dropping. They've already priced one in for September. That's already priced into the market. That's why rates have come down. And then supposedly we're supposed to cut in the next year. And so a lot of these guys that are locking 3-year prepayments, 5-year prepayments, well, if we go into, we'll just say the fives next year, I mean, we're not going to get into the twos probably, but if we even go into the fives, I can go 7.5 across my portfolio, which is what my average interest rate is, down to 5.5. Well, I can cash out at that point, and my global cash flow doesn't change. But now I have an extra 250, 300,000. And so, I don't think that a lot of people are thinking about, if I take a deal today and I go refinance it, well, I've got to pay origination, I've got to pay doc fees on that. I have to pay title fees, and then I have a prepayment penalty. Well, if I want to go refinance that again next year, well, now we got to take that into account again, plus a prepayment penalty. So I don't know. For me personally, I do not want to lock myself into any refinances at the moment. I'm okay, because my rates are 7.2, 7.5 on the deals I'm getting right now. I could go DSCR for like a 6.8. I'm okay taking that spread or not taking that spread currently because I don't want to shoot myself in the foot. And so I'm kind of just waiting for the right environment to where I can go, okay, you know what? Let's refinance the portfolio. Maybe we even increase our global cash flow because rates have come down, but I can go ahead and pull that cash out at that time, pull a couple hundred grand out, and then move on from there. And so I am just trying to forecast, which obviously nobody's got a crystal ball, but I don't want to shoot myself in the foot before those rates really go into a good environment, because I don't feel like there's enough of a difference or spread right now for me to go from a 7.5 to a 6.8, so I'm just not going to refinance. I also think that people don't take into account those prepayment penalties because I personally think that rates will come down within the next 3 years, which that's like minimum prepayment on DSCR right now. And so I was talking to a lender the other day. He's like, yeah, it's no big deal. I've got it priced into my deals. I'm like, well, for me, even been extra $3,000 per deal. I mean, I always think like that's like half a trip to Maui. You know what I mean? Like I even if it's priced into the deal, I still want to try and keep that in my pocket. And so anyways, not to go off on too much of a rant, but
Yeah, so that's kind of crazy how you basically scaled to like 50 units yourself of you and your wife, and your average interest rate was 7.5%. Like, for me, most of my scaling was during COVID. And
yeah.
obviously interest rates were like super low. So my average rate is probably like 3.5. Yeah, but I did kind of get stuck. It's funny, on my 20 unit Enid, I was doing a BRRRR on that one actually. So I got a hard money loan, bought it for
Hmm.
350, 20 unit off market using direct mail. And they're willing to basically, I had to put 25% down, but they were willing to fund me the hundred and I think $50,000 renovation with that. So it was a little bit more leveraged. And what was funny was the interest rate was probably like a 9-10% hard money loan.
Wow.
But it took me about that was May of 2022. And then by the time I finished, it was like July 2023. But that's what happened in July 2023. That's when
Hmm.
rates skyrocketed on me. So it's funny, like I was getting quoted the same interest rate as my hard money loan, like from a year ago. So I was
Wow.
getting quoted like 9%. So I ended up using Bank of the West, which is now BMO, and doing a cash out refinance. I did get burned. So I basically left some money in the deal. Like I think I ended up
Hmm.
leaving about 80,000 in the deal. So about half my money in the deal.
Hmm.
And now, because the interest rate's like seven, I think I locked in a 7% interest rate. Like the cash
Nice.
flow wasn't that great on that property.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, this went from like a home run deal to like a base hit, right? But
Hmm.
to your point, um, in retrospect, actually, it was nice that I was able to leave money in the deal because it allowed me to be in a better financial position with that 20 unit where I could kind of ride it out. So that is really smart to be able to like, watch your leverage because it is tempting, especially when people are like, well, you can borrow out 7 and you can make 10, right?
Hmm.
Like that's what people say, even to me. And I'm sitting at roughly 50% loan to value in my portfolio. Like most of my properties in California, insane appreciation, not much rental cash flow at all, right? It's like the
Yeah.
complete opposite of Oklahoma. That's why I actually went to Oklahoma because I wanted balance. California was all appreciation, no cash flow. Like during COVID, all my single family homes in California are appreciated by 500,000 each on average. And I did absolutely nothing. I
Wow.
literally did nothing, right? Rented the same tenant, barely cash flows, despite self management, not factoring in if
Hmm.
I have repairs. If I have repairs, I'm cash flow negative that month, right?
Hmm.
If I were to get third party property management, I'd be cash flow negative. So I just said that's not sustainable. That's why I actually cashed out refinance some of my single family homes. Now they're what I call alligators, unfortunately. So
What
now
do you
they're
mean by
cash flow
alligator?
negative. So
Oh, there.
alligators basically like you're losing money every month. And I took that money and then basically bought my apartments in my mobile home park
Nice.
in Oklahoma. But to your point, like my 26 unit, so I bought for 500,000, 26
Oh,
unit, and yeah, in Bethany, Oklahoma. The water. Yeah, yeah. Well, I just thought like I come from Los Angeles, right? I'm like a condo
yeah.
costs $500,000. I can get a
Exactly.
26 unit for like 500,000. That's crazy to me. That's insane to
Hmm.
me. And it was like a tired landlord. He self managed it himself. He was a lawyer. Sent out direct mailer. I literally offered him like I think 520, expecting him to counter me. I was willing to go up to like 700, being honest, but he just accepted my offer immediately. And I was just like, okay, sweet. And
Yeah.
then got under contract, put 25% down. And I actually negotiated about $60,000 in seller repair credit because they need a new
Nice.
roof. And once again, he could have said no, and I still would have taken the deal down, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But I just said, hey, worst case, you ask, and they say no, or they say yes, or they say something less. So he gave me $60,000 in seller repair credit. And I basically could use that to cut my down payment in half. So essentially, I only put like 12, 13% down the deal instead of 25 because I got 60K back.
Hmm. Nice.
And I used that money to replace the roof because it was an old roof, right? Like the insurance was like saying, hey, you got to replace that roof if you want us to insure
Yeah.
you. So, I had the money set aside. And what I did was I renovated all the units. So it took me about 2.5 years. I was going slowly. I wasn't like rushed because I wasn't hard money. I wasn't bridge debt. And,
Hmm.
so I wasn't under the gun. And I locked in a 4% interest rate. So I'm like, I'm not worried,
Wow.
right? So from there, I did self fund the renovations by pulling money out of my single family home. So I put $300,000 to fix this all up. like all the units
Nice.
over time. So what's nice about multifamily, as you know, like I could be renovating like 5 units, but I'm still getting income from like 20 units. So
Exactly.
it's versus single family home, when you're renovating it, you're getting zero income. So
100%.
I kind of like that conceptually that, hey, it's nice. Like I was not getting crazy cash flow, but enough to like float the property
Oh
while
yeah.
I'm renovating it. So it kind of mitigated the risk for me. And, I probably renovate each unit about 10 to 14K per door. It was like, new kitchen cabinets, LVP flooring, scrape the popcorn ceilings. I had to replace a lot of the water heaters because they were the Zinsco ones, the Zinsco water heaters.
Yeah.
Had to replace those, which was baked in, and basically repainted the exterior, retouched the interior, and then basically that's how we renovate all the units. So it went from C class to probably, I would call it, the look inside was probably like maybe like a B plus in terms of the inside. And then we were charging, so that the owner was charging 500, but all bills paid, which I didn't like.
Wow.
So if you're 500 all bills paid, it's effectively only netting about 350 for rents because utilities it was about 100, 150 on average. So his effective rent was 350, but the market was around 700 to 800, depending on, 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom. So that's exactly what I did. I came in there, renovated all the units, and I was able to raise the rents. Some tenants would leave. Some tenants would actually upgrade from the old unit to the new unit, and then I would then renovate their unit. Basically, I was able to double the rent. I know it makes me sound like an evil landlord, but basically able
It
to
is what
increase
it
the
is.
rent. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I
The
put in
value.
300K to fix it up, right?
Exactly.
And my rents honestly were still below market rents a little bit, right? I always
Yeah.
try to do that. I want to be a little bit below so that I have margin.
Exactly. Were these one bed, one baths, Stephen, or two bed, one
They
bath?
were it was half half, so it was a mix of 1 bed, 1 bath, and 2 bedroom, 1 bath.
Okay, nice.
So it was a good mix. So now I was able to rent it out for like a 1 bedroom was around 700. The 2 bedroom you could kind of push closer to 800.
Nice.
And like at one point we hit 100% occupancy, so I knew my rents were good and reasonable because if
Oh yeah.
you're only 100% if you're a little bit below market. If you're
Yeah.
higher, and you'd have some vacancies. So basically, with apartment complexes, the value is based on net operating income divided by the market cap rate. It's not based on sales comps. So
What
if
did
I
you value
doubled
the
the
cap on that? Sorry.
at the time, I had about an 8 cap on the deal when I first
Okay,
came
nice.
in.
Yeah.
And I think it could have at one point it was probably less than an 8 cap, but I just kept 8 cap to be like
Yeah.
conservative. But basically, I was able to double my NOI because I doubled the rents. And you have fixed costs of owning apartments, right? Insurance is the
Yeah.
same, property tax is the same, the water bill was the same occupancy.
Mm-hmm.
So I had the economies of scale where I was able to. I think when I took over the property, the owner was getting $8,000 a month, and now I'm at $16,000 a month. So what happens if you double your NOI, assuming the same cap rate, you doubled the value of your asset. So I bought it for half
Mm-hmm.
a million, put in 300, and now it's worth about 1.6 million.
Wow.
So I could have done obviously a huge cash out refinance if I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
I would pay a prepay as you alluded to. So commercial, unfortunately, there's a step down. So 5% year one, 4% year two, 3%, 2%, 1%. Um, and with commercial, as you know, it's not fixed, 30-year fixed, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do a
5 year balloon.
3-year
520.
balloon, 5-year, 7. I did a 10. So I
Nice.
tried to hold on as long as possible. But there are actually lenders out there now where they will do 30-year fixed on apartment complexes, but you're going to pay a higher
Mm-hmm.
interest rate. Probably. It's Velocity Mortgage. I was like, wow, I wish I had that option because
Yeah.
30-year fixed is amazing. Like, like
Oh
you're
yeah.
guaranteed for like the life of the property essentially versus now in 10 years or 5 more years from now, I'm forced to refinance whether I want to or not.
Is is that value? Have you looked into Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, the funding on a deal like that? Can you get that on that size deal?
So I engaged kind of more like portfolio lenders and debt service coverage ratio lenders, and they did actually qualify me in DSCR, but I didn't engage like a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. I mean, I bought mine with Bank of the West, which is now BMO, so obviously I would engage them as well because
Mm-hmm.
they follow Fannie Freddie guidance. But there are lenders that work with that. For me, I'm sure like you, I usually engage multiple lenders and brokers on my deals to see what the options are because yes, the loan amount is a little bit less than what they're used to. But they did have a product where like, I basically could pull out like 75% loan to value, which is roughly about 1.2.
Hmm.
So I just said I could have, like you said, literally got my down payment back, got my renovation cost back, plus another 400,000 on top of that. But now this property is paper thin in terms of the margins, but then I would
Hmm.
have whatever my money to go buy more. So, was tempted to do that, but I'm glad I didn't because now this property is kind of like my cash cow in my portfolio, if I'm being honest. Like this one carries the team. It's like the
I
LeBron
bet.
James or
Sounds
of
like an
of
awesome deal. It's
my
like textbook.
portfolio. Yeah, it's like the textbook deal. And like you said, I only have a 350K loan on this property now. I only pay 2,000 bucks a month, and I'm gross renting 16K. So like, am I
Wow.
ever going to be worried about this deal not cash flowing? Probably not, right?
Yeah, not
So
at all.
it does give you that peace of mind to like, just leave that money in the deal and then just sit on it. So I definitely empathize with that approach. And like I said, like what we're trying to do is build long-term wealth and make it sustainable for the rest of our lives, right?
Hmm.
And that's the name of the game. So that's why I've actually considered, because right now I'm active income as a pharmacist,
Hmm.
right? And to your point, built up a $6+ million net worth, but my quality of life is exactly the same. I still go to work every Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I still live in the same house that most people would live in as a pharmacist, right? In LA.
Yeah.
I drive a Tesla, but everyone has a Tesla in California,
Yeah.
right? So you're not like you're that
That's right.
special unless you have the cyber truck. I didn't want to stick out that much. But like my lifestyle, if you were to compare it to a normal pharmacist about any assets, it's exactly the same, right? Like
Yeah.
it's nothing different. So I have thought like if I want to retire early and travel, I would basically have to sell some of my properties, pay Uncle Sam, unfortunately,
Hmm.
and then just pay off my primary residence, own it free and clear, and then maybe pay off one or both of my apartment complexes and then own those free and clear as well.
Hmm.
So, have you kind of thought of that approach of like paying off your primary or paying off some of your rentals? Obviously, you have 50 units, so you could probably
Great
liquidate
question.
half if you want to, and then pay off the other half, and now you're golden with everything owned free and clear.
That's a great question. So I haven't really. I am very pro debt. I don't know what it is, but debt does not make me uncomfortable one bit. I actually got a question. I was doing Q&A on my Instagram yesterday, and somebody asked, is your truck paid in full or is it paid off? It's not paid off. Like I said, I've got the cash to pay it off, but I've got the way I look at it is I know on average, if I go flip a home, because flipping is now a large part of my active income. Of course, I don't love getting rid of assets, but the properties I buy to flip are the ones that don't cash flow. I don't want to pass up on a deal that doesn't cash flow, and so I'll still buy it and flip it. And so, um, if I go flip a home, my average from purchase to exit is about 4 months, 4.5 months, and I double my money. A textbook deal for me, I just closed one the other day, 10 in, 30 out, so I actually tripled my money on that. Lies, every dollar I put in, at the beginning of the year, I'm making 6 to 8 by the end of the year. You When I think about that in terms of like, okay, I've got debt on my truck and I've got debt on my personal home. Well, if I use that money and just go pay off my assets, I could have instead used that money and went and continued to get a better return with buying and selling houses instead. And so for me, I just don't think it makes sense. I mean, and once again, I think it just depends on everyone's goals. Like you said, if the goal is travel, then like perfect, do it. So that's what I love about real estate. There's really no right or wrong. But for me, I personally don't even think I want to, at least at this point in my life, which I'm 24 as well. And I think that people do slow down as they get a little bit older. And so I will say now, and this is something I tell myself all the time, is like my mindset does shift and it shifts constantly. So like once again, I used to not believe in BRRRRs at all. And now I do think BRRRRs serve a purpose. I think there's a correct way to do them and the correct way to cash out. And so right now in my life, I really don't want to think about slowing down until I'm about 250K net a month per month. And I also don't think that I can get there until I'm probably 40, so another 16 years or so. Maybe I get there a little sooner, maybe I don't, but you know, I really would like a place. on Maui in Hawaii. I'd also like a nice boat, and I would like to be able to go fish, and none of that stuff is affordable at all. And you really can't do that unless you have a lot of cash, and that's what I think that I would enjoy doing. But at the same time, I just enjoy the hunt of finding deals, putting deals together. I enjoy leading my team and now making content as well. I get a lot of people there, just watching my content and are like, hey, I've always thought about real estate investing, but now I'm doing it because of watching your content. And so that's been really cool to see as well. So a lot of that stuff keeps me going, keeps me motivated. And so at this point in my life, no, I don't think that I'm anywhere close to paying off assets. And I still feel like a very small dog, in the grand scheme of things. And, you know, even listening to you and some of the assets you're holding, I'm like, I've still got a long ways to go in terms of where I want to be. So I'm happy. I'm just not satisfied. And like you've seen, like the quality of life doesn't exactly change. And that's where I think a lot of people don't realize whether you're making at a certain point, more money doesn't equal more happiness. I think there's a baseline of like probably right around $10,000 a month. If you can live on $10,000 a month, you can have nice people, you have a nice car. Of course, it depends on where you live, but 10 grand a month gets you pretty far. And then past that, it's like just what more you can buy. I'm not any more happy now that I'm making 50, 60, sometimes 100 grand a month than I am when I was making 10 grand a month. I buy more real estate and, maybe travel a little bit more lavishly. But once you get to a point where you don't exactly have to like stick to a strict budget, I think that for me is where like there's not a threshold that makes you that much happier above that. And so, one more thing I'll say, I put on my story yesterday, something I realized early on is when, I think this applies to most people, but when you buy new shoes, you get like a dopamine hit and they're new, you don't want to get them dirty and like, like it's a little bit of a dopamine hit. Same if you buy a new shirt or a new hat. It's different for everybody, but I think the same applies for when people buy like say a new house, to go from a $300,000 house to say a $500,000 house, there's going to be a huge dopamine hit. And I think that people are going to have like this happiness for a couple of months, but then they'll fall back to a baseline happiness, like where that's just the normal. And same with a new vehicle. I could take my truck and I could go buy the new version of my truck and I definitely am going to have like a dopamine hit for, I don't know, might be a couple weeks, might be a month, but I'll fall back to a baseline where it's just the normal over time. And so that's why like I try not to correlate my happiness to materialistic things and more so like traveling and enjoying family, enjoying friends. And I think as a younger guy like that was really cool that I was able to, and I don't even know how I stumbled upon that, but I just realized that at an early age. And so it's just I'm just gonna continue buying real estate until I guess I burn myself out, but I don't think I'm close yet.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. I mean, you're wise beyond your years because
Thank you, Sam.
basically for me, I was just chasing 100 units, right? And then like once I hit the goal, to your point, it felt empty when I hit. I was like, oh, it
Yeah,
didn't feel as good as I thought, but it was more of the chase to get there, which was more exciting, right?
yeah, for sure.
So it's funny, like they say in your 20s, you're just focused on a destination. In your 30s, you realize it's about the journey. And in your 40s, you
Yeah,
realize it's about the company, right? So it's like a progression
that's cool.
as like an investor as you kind of build wealth. And yeah, I love how you kind of mentioned like, yeah, at the point that we're at, like I know what you mean. To help me build to my certain point, I was focused on ROI, right? And so
Hmm.
the best ROI is typically gonna be more leveraged, typically,
Hmm.
right? That's why people like the BRRRR because they call it the infinite return, right? That's kind of the pitch thing. I have $0 in the deal, it cash flows, and I have my money, increase my velocity money, and go buy another one. So that's focused on ROI. But the part that I've been kind of transitioning towards over like the past 2 years, once my portfolio has stabilized and I kind of pivoted to more focus on my personal life, probably the past 2 years because I slowed down on real estate. It was like I've been focusing more on like return on like my happiness or return on my time.
Hmm.
Because I'm sure you're experiencing once you kind of hit a certain thing, like, okay, is it worth it for me to like buy this deal if it only makes me like 10,000 bucks? At this point, it
Exactly.
may not be worth that headache, but would it be worth it for me to like take down another apartment complex where I could make 800 to $1 million in forced appreciation and cash flow? right? So like you really have to like elevate your time, and is it worth it? And to your point earlier, like we don't need deals. Like I don't
Yeah,
need a deal. You don't need a deal. We can literally stop right now, both of us, and we own more real estate than most people already at our age. And once you kind of realize that, that's when you become the most powerful because now
yeah,
you're unemotional, you're agnostic. I'm like, I'll offer you this offer because it makes sense for me. Take it or leave it, right? I'll give you, multiple offers. My seller finance offer, which is higher, my 50-40-10 offer, which if you carry 40%, I can give you an aggressive offer, or my quote unquote conventional financing offer. So like once you become like that systematic and that unemotional, like I felt like I became more dangerous in a weird way because, like I
oh
said,
yeah,
I'm not desperate. I don't need your deal. I don't need to buy your deal. But if it's a good deal, I'm not going to pass it up either.
hundred
So it
percent.
has to fit like my criteria to do that. So like like I said, it's kind of a privilege of those who've like we've scaled up. Like in the beginning, we took more risk, right? Like you took risk with your rentals and like maybe not as the great areas as maybe today. But yeah, it's kind of like how you evolve as a real estate investor. Like you said, your priorities, like let's say in when you're 30, Cam, like your priorities might change and you have the assets to do what you want to do. If you said, you know what, I don't want to work anymore. I just want to like chill in Maui for like a year and I'm okay
Hmm.
just like pausing life. You could like, yeah, get an Airbnb in Maui for a year and probably afford it. Right. So it's
Exactly.
really that optionality and knowing that you have options. I think that for me, that was the big appeal of like real estate was like, if I'm just sick of my job one day, I just can go home, sell two assets. Yes, I pay taxes, but now I'm free. I don't have to do a W-2
Exactly.
if I don't want to. So just knowing that is really nice. So I kind of, you kind of alluded to that, 50K per month goal. I mean, how'd you kind of come up with that goal of 250K net per month? And I assume that's between your flips, your real estate business, and then your rental income.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people, like you were saying, they have like a unit goal. I don't really care about units personally. Of course, I don't want to have 2 million square foot asset that makes 200K net a month. Like I want to be diversified. But 50K net a month is just like it's a it's a huge goal to reach for. So I'm not going to, like you said, hit it and then be just like, well, what now? And so for me, I just wanted to have like a North Star goal, I guess you would say, or however whatever they say. Because once again, I enjoy the journey. I enjoy going after deal flow and making deal flow happen, but I also really enjoy fishing. And I think it would be really, really cool. Like what makes me happy is to like own a nice boat that I can bring my family out, fly my family out, and have, maybe a place in Hawaii and then maybe a place in Florida. Those are two places I really enjoy and bring them out. But I learned real quick when you rent a boat, you burn through $1,000 in gas in like a couple hours. You know what I mean? And so it's like, okay, well, to be able to do that, you gotta have a lot of cash. You gotta have a lot of cash flow. And boats aren't cheap either. And so I don't know. I think it just gives me something to pursue for the next 10, 15 years that I I'm probably not going to hit anytime soon and enjoy the journey in the meantime. And, creating generational wealth is a big deal for me. I don't have any kids, but I've got guardianship of my 6-year-old brother. So me and my wife take care of him, and so he's kind of like a kid. We have him full time, and I want to be able to create generational wealth for him, and teach him how to make money. He's already interested in doing a lemonade stand, and he watches me and my actions and how hard I work, and he's starting to pick a lot of that stuff up, and I think that's really cool. So I don't know. I don't really have a huge rhyme or reason behind it other than I want to be able to have a nice boat one day, a nice place in Florida, a nice place in Maui, and just have something to reach for. And so it's not like I want to make 50K a month and maybe I hit that in 7, 8 years. Like 250K a month allows me to have that leverage. And one of my one of my large goals is to be able to impact 100,000 people. And it's not something I can tangibly track. And so I don't know if I'll ever hit that in my lifetime. And so through content, that's been cool just to see that I'm making an impact on a daily basis as people watch my stuff. But I've got dreams of being able to go and help with fresh water for people that don't have fresh water. I think that that's like kind of a basic need is I think everybody should have access to fresh water. So it's cool to see those guys that go to those areas and they drill the wells and they do the solar and they get fresh water to these tribes in Africa or all around the world. It's crazy to think that there's still millions of people without fresh water, and so um, to be able to do all that stuff, you've got to have money. And not to say that I couldn't go drill a well today, because that's probably something that I could make happen in the next couple of years, and so that would be really cool. I like to talk about the stuff because it brings it top of mind. It's easy to forego like the goals that you make, so keeping them top of mind is really important. But I wish I had a better explanation for you, but that is just the brutal, honest truth of why I've got that 250K goal.
No, thanks for that transparency. Because, like, for me,
Yes,
my
sir.
longest time was 20K a month.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I mean,
honestly,
dude, that's awesome.
yeah, and it was just arbitrary. Like to your point, I literally just thought like 20K a month with like a paid off house was like my goal for the longest time. Obviously I'm in Los Angeles, so a little bit more expensive here, but it just was arbitrary. I didn't know why I
Yeah,
picked it. I never thought about it. But actually, as I started like thinking about it, I was like, well, for me, I like to travel, right? And then for me, I specifically prefer to travel. Like, I mean, I've been to Europe, I've been to like Asia. But I specifically, me and my wife
that's
like going
awesome.
to Asia because it's like pretty affordable. Like, you can get a hotel for like 30, $50 a night, and it's like a nice
That's
hotel,
crazy. Yeah.
right? Nice hotel. And then like the food there is like cheap. And then like just getting around, like Uber is like super cheap. So like we just realized that like you don't need a lot of money versus if you go to like, Paris or France, obviously it's gonna be like US
Hmm.
pricing, if not more expensive. So we just quickly realized like, wait, like if you keep your lifestyle like humble, you know what you want to spend your money on, like you don't need as much as you think, right? Because we all start off with less money than we currently have today, and we
100%.
live and we survive, right? And even for like your goal, because like why I asked 250, like even like right now, like yes, maybe you won't own a boat, but you can rent a boat for like a day
Yeah,
or two, and it's
100%.
not that much money. And even like Maui, if you want to just stay in Maui for like a month, you can rent an Airbnb for a month, and you won't own it, but you can still kind of experience like 80% of it without like achieving that final goal, right? So that's what's kind of nice too. And some people don't realize that you could still like have some sense of what your goal is today, but it just may be
Exactly.
slightly tweaked and modified. So that's something that like I've been like realizing, and like even me, like I used to think like only rich people get like maids to clean their house, but I literally just Googled, okay, how much does it cost really? And I was like, wait, it's only like $200 every two
Yeah,
weeks,
exactly.
and someone can clean your house. And I'm like, that's just one unit. That's cash flow, right? There you go. That's
Hmm.
your maid service for the month. And I was like, wow, I thought like only like multi millionaires of like Lambos had like people come clean their house, but it's like sometimes not as much as you think. So that's why I kind of ask, because like I feel a lot of people fall into that trap where they're just arbitrarily saying, I want 100 units. I was in that trap, and I want 20K a
Hmm.
month. I was in that trap, but I didn't
Yeah.
really put much thought to it. But it was nice to have a North Star to like strive towards, to like push yourself to. But I feel like I went a little bit too extreme where like it was kind of like affecting me, like stressing me out
Yeah.
unnecessarily. So it's nice to like, so what I've been doing recently is like, I want to like improve, but like at a very sustainable pace that I know that like if I take these actions, whether it's posting consistently on YouTube, whether it's like consistently just making offers that make sense for you, eventually, you'll get to like what your goal is. So that's kind of like what, I've done. And I even kind of thought and would love to pick your brain, like, obviously W2, it's stable income, but you're
Hmm.
limited in your income, right? Like I just
Hmm.
know exactly every 2 months or 2 weeks, exactly what I'm gonna get. If I'm lucky, I'll get a 3% raise, like
Yeah,
if you're
100%.
lucky. So like when you think by becoming a realtor, did it kind of make you like take the ball off of like buy and hold real estate? Because for me, I want to buy and hold. I like for me, I would only sell stuff that like I wouldn't buy myself,
Hmm.
or potentially wholesale deals that doesn't make sense for me. But I just was fearful that it would like take me back from my mission of like buying real estate, because see people who fall in that trap where they just fix and flip for the rest of their life, they wholesale for the rest of their life, and they own zero
Hmm.
assets, and they're just getting that quick cash, but they're not like keeping one or two for themselves for every like five they sell. And one day when your market dries up because of recession or interest rates or whatever, now you're kind of stuck. So
Hmm.
curious to hear your thoughts on that.
It's a great question. So I always think that the market doesn't dictate how much business I do, it just dictates how I do business. And so I don't think there's such a thing as like the market drying up. Even in 2007, 2008, people were still flipping houses and making money. Because I know one thing for a fact, and that's that people will always be buying and selling houses. There are certain markets and certain time frames where people buy less houses, but to think that Oklahoma City people will stop buying completely is just it just won't happen. So it's like how can you be a part of the percentage that's winning? And even right now, I mean, there's a lot of people that are not winning in our market, and across the United States. So I am a part of that percentage that's winning. And so it's just sticking to the fundamentals and sticking to what's working. And so lately I've gotten a lot more conservative on the way that I underwrite. And certain deals I'll pass on. I'm not making offers on everything. And so that's my mindset on that. I think that there will always be deal flow. There will always be money to be made. It's just where and how. So to your point, Stephen, definitely like it is hard sometimes when you're fixing and flipping because it's like, especially right now, nothing's really cash flowing, and so it's like what do you hold, and so I usually cherry pick 1 to 2 deals to hold out of like if I lock a certain percentage up, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna hold these right here. And so it's been definitely a little bit harder over the last 8 months because I was up until January, February, I was holding a decent amount, and then I'd come up with this goal of like, okay, I'm gonna go fix and flip this many because once again, I got to keep about 2 to 250 liquid for me to be comfortable. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go sell this many, and then I'm gonna build up to like 600K in liquid funds, and I'm gonna go buy a massive deal. And so that was 8 months ago, or yeah, roughly. I'm finally hitting that, so I've executed and I've made it happen, and the deals are closing. And so here I am. It's like, okay, we're like September. It's crunch time. I got to go get a deal, like a big deal, And so I'm underwriting these bigger deals, and it's like, well, shit. There's these deals aren't. I mean, it's not 26 unit for 500,000. That's for a fact, It's like, and so I'm looking at these deals. It's like, okay, do I just buy a not a very good deal, and like a base hit that's like an 8 cap with maybe, 10 cap upside. If I force the appreciation, maybe I can add laundry or I can bump rents, certain amount, or I can decrease expenses. But I mean, it's not gonna be a home run, And so it's kind of crunch time. I'm in a weird spot where we're nearing Q4, and these bigger deals they take a little bit longer to close sometimes, and so I'm at the point where I've got the cash and now I've got to decide what this looks like, And so, um, I don't know, but I will say to your point, I do hold deals still. It usually just depends. I look at both options. Like, for example, I've got one right now in Midwest City. Bought this deal for 140 grand. It's a 2022 build, so it's like almost brand new. I put about 26 into it. It's worth about 225, so it's not like a killer deal by any means, but it's such a nice home, and I know it'll be good for depreciation. I can do cost segregation on it. It's not gonna, it's will probably even negative cash flow 50, $100 a month, but I'm tempted to keep it just because it's a nice asset in a nice area and it help diversify my portfolio a little bit. And I know maintenance is going to be low because it's almost brand new. And then it'll be good for my taxes, and for me, the tax planning piece, depreciation is I've got to think about that sometimes. And so there are certain deals where it's like, okay, cash flow wise, probably not a great play, but it's got good equity and it's good for the taxes. So maybe we hold this, and then we 1031 it in a year and a half, 2 years, or whatever. And so that's a deal that I'm thinking about holding. I seller financed 5 deals in June, which kicked off a really good amount of cash flow. But the downside of those is they will probably get paid off at some point, and I can't do cost segregation on them. I can't depreciate them because I contract for deeded those properties, even though there are some investors out there that will still depreciate that on their taxes because they're still on the deed. I don't do that. And so those aren't deals that I can depreciate, but they're really good for cash flow. And so I'm kind of diversifying. It's like, okay, these are deals I'm going to keep for cash flow. And then the rentals right now, they just don't really cash flow, maybe $100 a month, 150 a month on like a pretty decent deal. And so I'll hold those because they're good for the depreciation. And I'm really queuing up for like a nice larger deal, but I've got to find it and I haven't found it yet. And so I guess if you find another one of these 26 unit unicorns that you were talking about, Steven, send it my way. But no, in reality, I'm looking right now, but I don't know. I just kind of cherry pick the ones that seem like they're gonna make sense, that I have good equity, a little bit of cash flow typically, and then that will be good depreciation for me.
Got it. I guess that are you kind of leveraging the real estate professional status for your
Yeah.
taxes?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
Got it. So basically, see, that's the part where I'm struggling with because I work a W-2
Yeah.
and my wife does too. And then we don't qualify as a real estate professional status, but I have thought that maybe in the future, if she became part-time pharmacist or just stepped away from pharmacy, she'd become the realtor. But even then, it's still hard to qualify unless you're actively like kind of doing what you're doing, managing flips,
Hmm.
and you're probably the one selling your flips as well, I'm assuming,
Hmm.
or at least your company. So you kind of have everything like kind of like vertically integrated for you to basically, so you basically probably pay very little taxes. I'm assuming you're trying to buy something big
Yeah.
for tax purposes as well,
Yeah. Exactly.
right? So and it's kind of
Yeah.
funny because like you feel pressure to buy something, but like for me, I'm just like, well, worst case, you pay taxes, and usually if you
Yeah.
pay taxes, it's a good. It means you made a lot of money. Like just like with the 1031, like a lot of people get super. You're under the gun, right? You have 6 months to do it, and especially like, as you allude to, a good multifamily deal. Geez, it takes like at least 3 months to like get this deal closing. Best case, assuming your lender is like nice, and between all the due diligence and just so many things can go wrong. Like, and even finding a good deal, it took me like 6 months of like mailers consistently to even find my
Exactly.
unicorn deal. So, like you said, you have to have that patience. And like you said, when you're stuck, like I have 3 months to get a good deal, you might end up like forcing yourself into a bad deal or like a base hit deal. But I guess what are you kind of targeting? Are you targeting like apartments, commercial, or are you just kind of open?
Right now, I'm open to looking at most asset classes. I would say multifamily is definitely kind of at the top of my list. The problem with multifamily is there's so much competition, and we with the way cap rates are right now. I mean, I'm not going to buy an 8 cap. I'm like I would buy that 26 unit deal that you're talking about, but I wouldn't buy what's on market right now, and I probably need to go direct to seller. It sounds like looks like you were finding, we're direct to seller on the single family side, and that's probably why I find decent single family deals, but not on the multifamily side. So multifamily would be at the top of my list. I really like industrial and flex space. Like I said, we've got 12,000 square feet of industrial that we bought, and we were able to force the value on that about 600K when we bought it, and so that was really cool. And it's just triple net is an amazing model to be able to triple net properties. Tenants pay the taxes, the insurance, and they do the maintenance. And so it really doesn't get much better than that. And what I like about the commercial side as well is we're getting 5 to 7 year leases. And so, I mean, they are truly hands off. It's like, that industrial deal put 5K in our pocket every month, net, with no maintenance, no taxes, no insurance. And so that would be at the top of my list. I don't think I want to buy any retail right now. We already have that retail that we're working on. Not against the asset class, I just don't know it as well. And so we're still working through that deal that we bought, that 11,000 square feet of retail that we bought earlier this year. And so we're actively leasing that up and it's going pretty well. It's just slow return tables on the commercial side. And so multifamily or industrial slash warehouse is mainly what's top of mind at the moment. Or I would look at a single family package if it came down to it, maybe 15, 20, 25 homes, but the deal needs to pencil. That's what's most important right now. And hopefully I can hover around that, anywhere from like 7 to 1-2 purchase would be ideal. And that's what I'm looking for at the moment, but I'm not super stuck on any certain asset.
Yeah, it's like for me, when I send out my direct mail campaign, because how Oklahoma codifies their properties, I end up setting a category called commercial.
Oh
Commercial
yeah.
prop or well, apartments could be classified as commercial, but
Hmm.
by collateral damage, a lot of times people with strip centers, flex spaces do reach out to me. Like when I send out my direct mail, because I try to cast a wide
Hmm.
net. So it's funny. Like I remember underwriting like a medical office building in Enid, Oklahoma. It was across from that hospital in Enid. I forgot the name of it. But it was like a medical office building, and it was not triple net, but it was double net. I think for me, what scares me about commercial might be a limiting belief because I don't know the asset class as well. Like full disclosure, is that like it's like triple net's super nice when it's leased out, right? It's so passive. You basically get mailbox money and you deal with
Hmm.
nothing, right? So on paper it makes sense, but then once that tenant leaves, now the value of that asset drops significantly.
Hmm.
You have to take a while to rent it out to a new tenant, and then most likely you're going to pay tenant improvement for the next person that does lease it out. So I think that part kind of feared me, but yeah, for the term that you have them for the lease, it's amazing, right? Super passive, super easy. But then to me, I kind of felt like the value of commercial was dependent on the lease. So obviously, if you lease out to like a Starbucks, it's going to be at a lower cap rate and valued higher versus like if you just rent out to some maybe mom and pop, it maybe won't be as like enticing. So I know a lot of people
Definitely.
they kind of graduate from like apartments, mobile home parks into triple net leases because it's more
Hmm.
passive. So I do see that progression and we may get to that point one day, but that was just kind of my hesitancy in like pulling the trigger on those.
I will say, Stephen, like the tenant improvements, those are typically financed in. So, some tenant improvements will pay, but a lot of that, we're financing that in. If we do 15, $20,000 in tenant improvements, we're adding that to the tenant's lease. And so we do end up getting TI back most of the time. And not always, we still pay some TI depending on the lease and how motivated we are to lease the deal. So that's that piece. I mean, I definitely can understand like losing the value. But if you feel confident about the asset, like yes, you're gonna have longer exposure times, but if somebody rents out, then at that point you rent somebody else in. But I also think that it's a lot easier that say, our commercial building, for example, a 7-year lease. Well, year six, we'll go ahead and start marketing that, or 6.5. And so we're gonna have some time when the tenant is still in place when we can have some exposure on the market to find another tenant. But definitely, I mean, it is definitely a different ball game. Definitely longer exposure time, more negative cash flow in the meantime. But when you get those leases in place, it's very nice because you have them for typically the long haul, 5 to 7 years. 3 years maybe minimum. And so definitely understand that. But I like the upside as well. But that's also why I think it's good to be diversified. If you've got some multifamily, like for you in your position, I would think you've got a good amount of positive cash flow. It would, if you could find a small flex space, small warehouse, you could float, negative or an interest only payment for 6, 8 months while you're waiting on a tenant with the cash flow that you have. And I think that's why people graduate once they've bought single family and multifamily to commercial is because you can float more. You can't go from no asset to then going and buying a warehouse because it's going to be hard to float that for 6 or 8 months. But if you have the other assets that are going to carry that along, then it's just more diversification and not as challenging, or not as stressful either.
Okay, no, that's great insights. That's why I like talking to people who actually own the asset themselves, right?
Yes, sir.
Because
For
if you
sure.
talk to a broker, of course they're going to tell you the only good stuff because they want to sell
Oh,
you the
yeah,
deal and get their commission. So that's why it's funny. I always say like brokers make
exactly.
you more broke
Yeah,
in their
exactly.
name.
You got to be careful. A little
Yeah,
biased for sure. A little biased.
yeah, yeah. It's just like, but obviously, like a broker who like invests themselves and own assets themselves, it's like a different perspective versus somebody
Mm-hmm.
who's just they don't own anything. That's just their job to make money. So
100%.
I kind of I guess I'm curious. So like your streams of income is selling your real estate company where you're selling real estate, you're doing fix and flip, and then you own rental income as well. I guess which one like makes the most, and I guess which one do you allocate your most of your time to? You would say.
So I would definitely say the flips, but flips definitely make the most. Of course, the sales cycle or the cash conversion cycle is just very hard to track because I might buy 4 deals in May and they're not closing until September, or August or whatever that comes out to. I've got 4.5 months in between them. Usually it's a couple months of floating, and that's why I'm really trying to like, for the most part, I usually have like maybe a wholesale deal closing. and then like a flip closing every month. And then some months it's like this last week I've closed like 6 deals. And so it's hard to look at it just from like a weekly or a monthly basis because one month, I might clear 100 grand and the next month I might only clear 20 grand on flips. But annualized, I would say for sure flips. My real estate team does really well also. And it's really nice to have that because those are just nice, not not as large checks, but more consistent checks, on a weekly basis, and so that kind of helps float in between the flips. But the flips make the most because there's just more spread on them, and I've been doing more this year. And then the active income from my team helps float in between. And I don't sell real estate anymore. I'm just a little too busy from it or from everything managing the team and the flips and whatnot. And so I have some residual deals that have been closing since stepping out of selling active income, because I'd taken some listings and whatnot. But I would say flips and then my my real estate team, and then I've got my rentals as well, or that we cash flow on.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks so much, Cam, for being on for an hour and a half with me. I guess as we round out this conversation to respect your time here, kind of any last thoughts to the viewers about, I guess, getting into real estate that you would share?
Well, I appreciate you having me, Steven. It's been a fun time to hop on here and talk. But no, I would say, a few of my fundamentals that I guess I live by in business is I always weigh my risk reward. What's the risk? What's my upside? What's my worst case scenario? I always under overestimate my rehab and underestimate my ARV. I don't think anybody's ever gone wrong with overestimating rehab and timeframes and underestimating ARV and rental comps. So just be conservative. Opportunity cost, we talked about that a little bit, but opportunity cost is something I think about a lot. If you go buy a burnout, that maybe takes 2 years to turn around, could you have just bought a turnkey deal and been just as much ahead, and so there's opportunity cost to doing that deal. And so I think about that. Just because a deal makes sense doesn't mean that it is the best deal to buy, because there's opportunity cost to buying everything. And so I don't know. Those are my three principles that I live by the most, I would say. And then lastly, to scale at a young age, and there's a lot of stress that comes along with it. But I've just noticed that, and I still get stressed out, but anytime I'm stressed and like extremely stressed, it's usually because I'm not being very grateful. And so I try, as to the other entrepreneurs, the people that are getting into business and going and doing deals, as you get stressed out, I think that it's good to try to remain grateful because it's hard to be stressed when you're thinking in a grateful mindset, And so I think about that, like if I'm like, damn, this contractor screwed me over, or this property's way over budget. I'm gonna have to sell it because it just doesn't make sense as a rental anymore. And like I'll get real heated up about that stuff. And then I try and take a step back, be grateful. Everybody's healthy around me. Life is good. And this deal doesn't matter a year from now. We can recoup our cash. I'm not losing my ass, and we continue to go do deals. And at least I learned from the lesson, and so that served me pretty well. And it's hard to get in that mindset when you're going through the thick of it. And everybody's going to go through the thick of it at some point. And so I would just say you can weather that storm and keep a positive mindset is extremely helpful. So anyways, that's all I've got, Steven. I appreciate you sharing some of the deals that, and what your journeys look like. That's really cool. It sounds like you've been killing it, and hopefully maybe we do some business here in Oklahoma City. And if you pass on anything, maybe send it my way, wholesale it to me, maybe, and I can maybe buy from you.
Yeah, no, definitely looking to like collaborate in Oklahoma and then maybe on more podcasts if you're interested in the future as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, super valuable. And like I said, you're wise beyond your years. Like what you described,
Thank
I,
you,
I
Steven.
just discovered in the past like 2 years when, I hit my low point in 2023 because I wasn't, to your point, wasn't grateful and I was stressed out and I was like unaligned. And then once I kind of like started gratitude journaling and being more grateful for what I have, that's when I kind of got out of my hole. And that's actually like when I started creating content was when I was at my
Nice.
lowest because it was a form of like therapy for me.
That's
But
awesome.
I guess I'm happy to drop your contact in the description, but how can people get a hold of you if they
Yes,
want to
sir.
reach out?
YouTube is awesome. It's just Cameron Burke. Yeah, I've been trying to grow that recently. My Facebook, I post a lot on Facebook. It's Cameron Burke once again. And then Instagram is c.burkeee. And so those are the three ways. So, anyways, I guess if people made it this far, appreciate you guys listening. And once again, thank you, Steven. Thanks for letting me be on here.
All right, cool. Thank you everyone for listening to the Making Multifamily Money podcast.